Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Buick Encore GX, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster diode wiring kit. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this is going to work for you. So before we kind of jump right in and start talking about the diode wiring kit, I figured it would be useful just to kind of refresh ourselves and touch base on the 5 main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Buick down the road in the first place. First one's going to be your base plate. That's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. And the tow bar is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your Buick to the back of your motorhome. The third main component is going to be safety cables, and those are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. Those are going to keep everything paired together. The fourth main component is going to be your tow bar wiring, and so that's going to be the wiring that transfers the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Buick, not only keeping you safe but legal as well. And last but not least, the fifth main component is going to be a supplemental braking system. What that's going to do is apply the brakes in your SUV whenever you hit the brakes in your RV, and that's going to help bring you to a predictable and complete stop. But with that said, the way the diode wiring kit is going to work is those signals are going to be translated here to the back of your Buick, from the back of your motorhome. So today we don't have our motorhome, so we're really not able to hook directly up and show it to you, but you can kind of get an idea of how that's going to work. But so imagine, let's say if you're hooked up to our motorhome and we had the right turn signal going, that's what would happen back here. Same thing for the left turn, the running lights, and the brake lights. So we're going to have all those proper signals to, stay a little bit safer. And when it comes to wiring, there's a couple of different options. My go-to almost every single time is the diode wiring kit. And I say that because you're not even going to be able to notice it's there once it's installed, and it's going to be super easy to hook up, which is really important to a lot of people. Essentially, once it's all hooked up, all you're going to have to do is plug it in. So it doesn't take any time at all. Anyone can figure it out. Compared to other types of wiring kits, for example, like the magnetic lighting, those work just fine, but they're kind of a pain, honestly. You have a big bundle of wire. You're going to have lights that you need to stick onto the body of your vehicle because they're magnetic, and that's something you're going to have to set up every single time you want to take your car out. So put the lights on here, run your wires up, drape them all the way across your roof, hook up to your motorhome. Then, not to mention, when you get to your destination, undo all that stuff and then store a big bundle of wires. And that's just all that's not really necessary. If you use a kit like the diode kit, something you're really not going to have to worry about doing. So speaking of that easy use, here up front, this is going to be the connector plug that you can plug your cable into. So one end will plug into it, and the other end will plug into your motorhome. So there's several different kits available, and you're going to want to make sure you get the one that's best for you. So for example, today we originally started with the 4-way flat connector in to 4-way flat connector end. And this is kind of a kit we don't see very often, people using them. A lot of motorhomes now have the 7-way round type connector. But if your motorhome uses this and you don't plan on using any other accessories like a charge line, battery charge line, for example, this will work. So originally, this kit had this end on it, and you'd plug this into it, this into the back of the motorhome. But one alternative is, if a kit's out of stock or something like that, and you want the 6-way round, you can always just buy the 6-way round connector, cut the end off cut one of the 4 ends off the kit, and do that. And that's exactly what we did. But with that said, there's kits available that you won't have to do that. There's a kit that comes with no connector plug, so just the wiring and the diodes and kind of your basics. And you would use that kit if you already had the connector plug and some type of umbilical. A lot of times, some of the more premier tow bars will actually come with the umbilical and the connector plug, and if that's your case, that'd be the kit you'd want to grab, where it's just the wiring and the diodes and kind of the basics. There's also kits that come with everything: the wiring, the diodes, your connector plug, as well as the umbilical. And which one you're going to want to use really just depends on your situation. So this one, for example, 6-way round, 7-way round to the motorhome, and this one's called the hybrid. So you have part of the cable that is coiled, and the rest of it straight. And you would want to use this kit if your tow bar had channels in it on the side of it. That way you could run the straight part through and utilize those channels. And this one's especially useful if you happen to have a lot of distance in between your tow bar, or I'm sorry, in between your towed vehicle and your motorhome, because this one's probably the longest out of all of them. With that said, there's also a cable that is just completely straight, right? So it's just gonna be like this, 6-way round, 7-way round. And again, you'd use that if your tow bar had channels in it. And then there's just kind of the classic coiled cable. 6-way round, 7-way round. And this one you'd want to use if your tow bar does not have channels in it, because that coiled action there will keep it high off the ground whenever you're going straight, and will stretch out and give you that extra length whenever you're going around turns. So that's an option for you as well. And they make one more kit. Cable's very, very similar to this. It's coiled, with the exception of it's a 4-way round type connector to a 7-way round for the motorhome side. So again, that's kind of an odd one. We don't really see that often, but you know, there's always that scenario where that's your case, and if that's the situation you're in, that's the one you could always grab. So at the end of the day, if you're trying to set up a flat tow, this is definitely my top recommendation as far as wiring goes. It's just the easiest to use, and it's been really reliable. We don't really ever run into any issues with them for the most part. Now, as far as the installation goes, not too bad. I mean, everything's pretty straightforward. It's just time consuming, you know, having to route the wires from the front to the back and up into the tail lights and everything else. But the good news is you're only going to have to do it once, right? And then you're done and good to go. So as long as you spend a little bit of time on it and stay focused, really shouldn't run into any issues. But speaking of that, why don't we go ahead and install it together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Buick. And obviously we have the front end taken apart, and that's because we're doing this at the same time that we're doing our base plate. That's what I advise doing. But with that said, if yours is together, this can be done. It's just a little bit trickier. You know, you don't have as much room. But so if you're actually needing a 4-way flat end, you would simply just mount this up. Usually your base plate will have a connector or a piece where you can mount this up like ours does here. In our case, so our customer needs a 6-way round. So there's kits available that have this 6-way round. In our case, they were out of stock. So this is a way, there's a way around that. You can actually turn this one into a kit that uses this connector. So that's what we're going to do. With that said though, we're going to get rid of this 4-way flat. We're just going to cut the wires and get rid of that connector end. Then we're going to strip the insulation back on each wire a little ways. So about like that. And once you have them stripped, you go ahead and give them a good twist to keep them nice and tight. That'll help ensure we get a good connection. So I'll do that to all 4 of them here. And once I have that done, then we can work on our connector plug. So I'll grab it. And the way that the connector plug is going to work is pretty straightforward. We're going to have terminals on the back. And those terminals, you know, the wires are going to go to the particular terminals. So I'll go ahead, grab a screwdriver, and that way we can get started. I'll show you how to do it. So you're gonna wanna use a small Phillips head screwdriver like this, and you're gonna back out the set screws. So you wanna pull them out almost all the way. Try to leave them in there though, because if they come out, they're kind of hard to see, and a lot of times you'll drop it and have a hard time finding it. But with that said, they're gonna be labeled. We're gonna be using 4 out of the 6. We're gonna be using this one here, which is labeled TM for taillight. So our brown wire will go to it. GD for ground, so the white wire will go here. LT for left turn, so the yellow wire will go to it. And RT for right turn, so the green wire will go there. So I'll grab my wiring. I'm gonna loop this underneath. I think it'll look a little bit better. But we're just gonna take the appropriate wire and place it into the terminal. So we'll do the brown one for TM. So that just plugs in, you hold it in place and tighten down that set screw. We're going to repeat that process for our 3 remaining wires. So this is what your connector plug's going to look like once it's all hooked up. Now usually before you hook this up, you want to put on the dust cover. I forgot. Not a big deal. We'll just come to the other end of our wiring, cut that end off. We'll take our cover and just work it all the way down the wire. That way we can plug it onto the back of our connector plug and not have to worry about taking those wires back out or anything else like that. Also want to make sure that your wires aren't knotted. So that'll plug over this. Now I usually like to put some dielectric grease or something in there to help protect the terminals, but I usually wait to the very end once to verify everything is working. That way if there's an issue, we're not dealing with a bunch of sticky grease and everything. So we'll put it over this for now. We can always come back and add some electric grease and tape up the ends and everything else. So I went ahead and just secured our connector here to the bracket using a couple self-tapping screws. Then we can start to route our wiring. So I just ran it along through here, where it kind of goes through our base plate, side plate there. And then I routed ours right up this wiring behind our headlight into the engine compartment. So in the engine compartment, here's where our wiring comes up and around through here. Now I do want to mention, if you're going to be installing a braking system that requires a tap into the diode wiring, probably leave yourself a good foot of slack somewhere in this area. It just makes it easier to work with, but in our case we're not, so I just continued along through here and dropped it right down along the firewall to the underside of our vehicle. And when you're doing this, make sure and do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. So underneath our vehicle, this is where our wiring is going to come down. Use zip ties along the way to keep it secure. I just followed our brake lines here. So that's going to come on down. Just continue to follow those lines. And then once we get here in this area, we need to ground our white wire. And this is kind of a good spot, some nice thick steel kind of out of the way. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So what we can do is you can grab the other end of your wire. I kind of started to do it, but you can grab the white wire and just start to peel it off of the rest of the wiring here, and we're going to bring this all the way up to where we're going with it here. And I'm choosing to do it back here because we're going to need a length of wire later on in the installation. So instead of having to worry about getting one separately, we can do it like this and reuse this white wire. So just going to kind of eyeball our distance here, probably somewhere in this area. So cut that back, strip the insulation off, give that wire a twist, And take this ring terminal, slide it over, crimp it down. And then you're going to take this screw. That's how we're going to secure it. So I'm going to hold this up where I need it to go and run our screw through. With that connected though, I'll continue to route our wiring towards the back of our vehicle, and I'll show you what it looks like once I'm done. So I continue to route. Wire goes up over our rear axle here, around through here. And once I got to this point, what I did was pull the green wire off of the yellow and brown wire and routed that over to the passenger side. But while I did that, I also took that extra piece of white wire that we had cut and ran that over there as well. So that goes over there. The other end of the white wire, I just taped to our yellow and brown. And these are gonna hang here for now, but eventually these three wires are gonna get pulled up into the driver's side taillight pocket. These wires I just ran behind our bumper beam. I'll come back in a second, zip tie them up. But they're gonna run up through here and drop down right here. So I'll get those zip tied, and then we can go up top, get our lights and everything out. That way we can get our wires up to where we can get them hooked up. So up top, to get our tail lights removed, you're gonna open up your hatch. You're gonna have these plastic covers. You can take a pick or a flathead, pop them open. That's got to expose a T15 fastener underneath. We'll pull those out. That one's kind of in there pretty deep, so we'll just leave it in there and grab it. We actually pull the light out. And now you're just gonna kind of work it, gently rocking it and kind of applying pressure to the back. It is gonna be tight, so but once we get it to come free, we can get it disconnected. So you're just gonna take these connectors there, and turn them to the left. This one up here, there's actually an electrical connector in there. So we'll push down on that, separate it, set our light off to the side, and do the same thing to get the other one out. So now we can get the wires set up to get our diodes installed. I went ahead and just pulled back the tape here on them and tested the wiring. We were looking for our taillight signal and our brake light signal, which that happens to be the green wire here and the red wire. So the green wire is going to be our taillight signal, and the red wire is going to be for our stop and turn. So with that said, we need to cut these. Just cut them in half. Then we need to strip back the insulation on each wire. So you're going to do that. Give each wire a twist. And then you're going to put on each one of these ends, one of these blue terminals. So I'll slide over. and get crimped out. So with all those ends done up, we can take our diodes now. Diode that has a single terminal labeled out. You're going to connect that to the end closest to our bulb there. Like so. Then we'll just go color for color. So red to red, green to green. And then what I've done to get our wires from underneath pulled up, I'm just using a pull wire. So this is a piece of tube. You can use like a coat hanger, drop it down. And you can see it down there. I just connected our wires to it. It makes it really easy to pull them out where we need them to go. So what I'm going to do here is kind of hold these up, and I'm just going to zip tie them up here. That way they don't want to fall back down under our car, and we have all the proper length that we need to work with here. I kind of trim these to length. And just like the other ends, we're going to strip all the insulation back. And with the white and brown wire, we're going to do something a little bit different. So with the white and brown wire, we're going to connect them together. So you're going to twist them together like this, nice and tight. And then you're going to use one of the yellow spade connectors there. Put that over, crimp it down, just like the others. And with the yellow wire, this one's going to get just a standard blue terminal there. Nothing really too special about this one. Plug that over, crimp it down, then we can hook it to our diode. So the green wire is for our taillight signal, so we're going to take these two wires and plug them in. And since the red is our stop and turn, we're going to take our yellow wire and plug it into there. So I went ahead, stuck our diodes together. Now we can simply plug everything back in. If you can get it to line up here. Once we get everything plugged back in though, we'll simply just reinstall our tail light the opposite way that we removed it. So over here on the passenger side, essentially did the same exact thing. The factory color of the wires are identical. Green for tail, red for stop and turn. And I hooked them up the same way, except, the colors of the new wires that we ran are different. The white wire is going to control our taillight signal. So that's plugged into the diode that has the OEM, the factory green wire. And the new green wire is going to control our stop and turn. So that's plugged into the diode that has the factory red wire. So all set up the same. So once you have it all hooked up, we go ahead and get this light reinstalled as well. So now it's a good idea to test our wiring to make sure it's working properly. So I just plugged it into a test box. You can also use your motorhome, but keep in mind if your motorhome has wiring issues, it's going to translate over to the car. So with that said, I have our taillights turned on. Go ahead and click on our left turn, our right turn, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster diode wiring kit on our 2022 Buick Encore GX.